Hey everybody, today's video I want to go over how to troubleshoot some low back pain that you might be getting with your kettlebell swings or your deadlift. Now, a lot of the times it could be that you might be getting a little bit pulled down, a little bit rounded, but with this video we're going to assess the hip because it might be a culprit. Now, how you might think that it's the hip is, you might feel a little tight kind of in this front part here, anterior lateral hip. Can't feel the glute really fire up. And the more you swing, the more that you feel the low back starting to take over. So to quickly assess, we're just gonna look at simply balance. So I'm gonna stand on the left leg, and then I'm gonna check to see, can I hold this for about 10 seconds with my eyes closed? Not too bad. And then you're just gonna compare it to the right. Okay, if that's not too bad, if there's a problem on the one hip, you might start wobbling, you might start to lose a little balance, but you're also paying attention to how you feel. Can you feel when you stand on that stance leg? Can you feel that glute fire up? If you can't, that might be the hip that's a little bit windy. So the next one we're going to go over to is active, a single leg balance with rotation. So we're looking for about 45 degrees of external rotation, about 30 to 40 this way. And if you see a difference and feel a difference, now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I kind of feel that in my glute here and I feel it in the front of my hip. Those guys might be giving me problems and causing me not allowing me to finish through with my swing. So we're going to come down and we'll confirm. Can I open up my hip right and left? Okay, so you see on my left hip it's a little bit different. That knee's kind of hanging up here. So we might have a tight TFL, a tight hip flexor, but we're just going to poke around on a few muscles and see what happens. So you're going to take out your foam roller, lacrosse ball. I prefer the foam roller. It's a little bit more gentler and you can get a little bit more broader on this. If you go with a lacrosse ball, it might be too sensitive. You're not going to lay on it. So we're going to go after TFL first. So it's kind of this front hip flexor muscle that tends to get tight on a lot of people. And it's notorious to try and take over for the hip stabilizers, but it also attaches to the IT band. So if people get IT band syndrome, go up and start poking around that TFL, you're going to find some nice trigger points. So we got a little guy right there. And instead of just rolling around, I'm going to lift my leg up off the floor. Now what that does is it fires up my abductors and my medial hamstring, and those are some of the opposite muscles of that hip flexor. Next, I'm just going to do some bending of the knee. Because it has attachment to the IT band, it's going to pin and strip that TFL. Okay? So I'm going to do about 5 there, and then I'm going to fire up that glute, and I'm going to press that hip backwards. Okay? So we're going into hip extension, adduction, and a little bit of external rotation just to try to feed that up. If you feel some tightness in the deeper in the hip, could be piriformis. So we're just going to go after that as well. So I'm going to go probing around. All right, there's a nice spot there. I'm going to hold that, so I'm going to pin it. I'm going to add some resistance with my hand, and I'm going to move. So I'm using that adductor, that groin muscle, to inhibit that piriformis muscle. And you'll notice it releases a lot faster. So I'm going to do about 5 here, and then probe around, see if that feels pretty good. Now we'll go back up and check our work. Did that free up the hip? All right, hips open. Now, when we do manual work, when we do lacrosse ball, when we do foam roller, we're changing the input to the brain. So we've created relaxation in certain muscles. We've also created some new awareness. So now we have to integrate some new movement. One of my favorite stretches is this shin box. And I'm going to reach and rotate. So it's the left hip. So I'm just going to reach and breathe. So just to create some hip extension here, I'm really pinning this bottom leg down. Okay, so again, I'm using that adductor muscle and I'm going to press the foot back. So I'm getting my glute on. I'm just going to do about 5 breaths here. And I can feel that starting to release. And you might even feel some stretching or pulling the ribs. All the same tissue, okay? You've got some spiral fascial lines, you've got some lateral fascial lines that attach to the hip. But if we're restricted here, you're gonna feel it down here. Now, we've created some new range of motion. We gotta create some new strength, okay? And the way we're gonna do that is we're gonna do a side plank, make sure we can feel the back glute. And we're just gonna do some kicks here. Okay, I'm just gonna do some short lever. I can go long lever if I got control. But the idea is when I flex this hip, this bottom leg's going into extension and I'm forcing those lateral glutes to work a little bit harder. Okay, you can do some isometric holds here. And then you can bend in and out of it. Okay. And then as primers for deadlifts and kettlebell swings, hit some glute bridges. Basically enough so your brain can feel those glutes working evenly. And it's usually anywhere from 10 to 20 reps. Okay? Once your brain can feel it, it can fire it. Okay? So that's really important. And then lastly, to kind of prime the front, lock glutes. So this is the top finish position. And you're just gonna do some shoulder touches. Okay? This works on rotation control, but it's working on that co-contraction from the glutes and the hip flexors that we need for that ballistic explosion out of the kettlebell swing. Come back up, check your balance, check your hip rotation. Got a little bit more out of that hip. Perfect. Once everything's symmetrical and even and it feels the same, go back, hit your swing. Okay? So really important, the breath. I'm bracing. My hips are coming out first, kettlebell second. And the kettlebell floats, so it gets really light here. So that allows me to, if I do it right, I can do one. And there you go. Let me know if you have any questions. Hope that frees up the hips and saves your back. And you should only be feeling that in the glutes and the hammies when you do this. Have fun in your garage.